One evening, I was driving along a long and deserted road. As the last rays of the sun disappeared on the horizon, my journey was progressing in silence and tranquility. However, suddenly, the engine of my car gradually weakened and finally came to a complete stop. I was coasting to a halt rapidly, and for a moment, I stopped and looked around. It was dark and silent. I was all alone on this desolate road, and helplessness enveloped me. Then, suddenly, I noticed a silhouette in the distance. As it approached, I realized an elderly man was walking towards me. He walked slowly, and his face was covered in wrinkles, as if carrying the sorrow of many years. When the man approached me, I felt a glimmer of hope. He offered to help and opened the hood to check the engine. My heart was racing. He silently examined the engine for a few minutes, then raised his head and turned to me. It was then that he began to speak. "Young man, years ago, I was also traveling on this road. When my car broke down, I found myself stranded on this deserted road just like you. Right at this spot, a woman appeared. Her dress was dirty and torn, her face pale and sad. She asked for help, and I gave her the keys to my car. However, that woman sped away at an unexpected speed, and I was left stranded on the road. The story the man told sent shivers down my spine, but I continued to listen. The elderly man went on. A few weeks later, I heard about a car accident that occurred on this road. A woman had been in a car accident and lost her life at the scene. The accident site was right here. The woman inside the car, the one who had asked for my help, was the same woman. Since that day, when I walk here at night, I sometimes see the same woman. She waves and asks for help, but she never allows me to approach." The story the old man told was both chilling and thought-provoking. Talking to him and hearing his experiences on this dark and silent road where my car had broken down was truly a terrifying experience. His story was the kind that would stay with me, and even now, when I pass by that road, this story comes to mind and sends shivers down my spine. The sad expression on that old man's face and the horrifying tale he shared continued to haunt me for a long time. One night, beneath a sky adorned with stars, I was returning from a long journey. As I drove down the quiet roads left behind by the city lights, my gas tank started to run low. In the pitch darkness, I began searching for a gas station, keeping my eyes fixed on the road. Finally, I arrived, and the station's lights cast a comforting glow around. Approaching the station, I felt at peace amid the silence. But as I parked my car and began to refuel, the station's silence suddenly enveloped me like a threat. It was well past midnight, and the air was cold. The surroundings were desolate and eerie. The station's lights illuminated the area, yet it felt strangely lonely. As I completed the fueling, I glanced around the dark corners of the station. Suddenly, my eyes caught a figure. In the corner of the station, there was an elderly man. His worn-out clothes swayed in the breeze's whisper. His eyes gazed into the darkness of midnight, wearing an expression as if lost in a memory. I turned my head, dismissing the mysterious figure. He was probably the station attendant, just doing his job. However, a strange unease crept over me. The attendant was an elderly man, clearly bearing the weariness of life on his face. When the transaction was complete, I decided to go inside and make the payment. The attendant was sitting at a cluttered table, smoking. He cast a glance at me and grinned. His grin was unsettling, with a strange glint in his eyes. The attendant released a puff of smoke from his lips and asked, "Midnight? Coming from a long way, aren't you?" His tone quivered strangely. Yes, you're right, I said, trying to sound composed but eager to uncover his secret. The attendant suddenly smiled harshly. This journey may not end well, he said. His words sent a chilling shiver through me like a gust of wind. Why do you say that? I asked. My eyes were fixed on his face. The attendant took a deep, calming breath. This place is dangerous, he said. Once, a group of young people had an accident here. The police investigated, but they couldn't find their bodies. Since that day, strange occurrences began happening at this station. My eyes widened, and my heart raced. What he was saying was unbelievable, but also spine-chilling. The attendant had begun to unsettle me with his frightening tales. Since that day, random sounds and sights have been reported at this station, the attendant continued, his eyes seeming distant. Some claim to have seen the shadows of bizarre entities while passing through here. Others wake up from nightmares featuring terrifying figures after driving through. This place has become restless. With his ominous stories and a growing sense of dread, I decided to quickly leave the station behind. The attendant's dark warning lingered in my mind as I jumped into my car and sped away. The unsettling atmosphere of that station I left behind still haunted my memory, and I vowed never to take that road again. That eerie encounter became an unforgettable memory for me. One evening, when I returned home, I turned the key and opened the door as usual. However, as I stepped inside, I felt an eerie atmosphere. I noticed that my belongings were not in their usual places. It was as if someone had entered my home and ransacked everything. My heart began to race, and with a sense of apprehension, I started to wander around the house. I saw that my things were scattered, and the doors and drawers were left open. It didn't seem like a typical burglary, because my valuable items were still in place. However, it indicated that someone had entered my home without my knowledge. I immediately called the police, and they advised me not to enter the house further. While waiting for the police to arrive, I stood outside the house, a mixture of curiosity and fear racing through me. When the police arrived, they entered the house and began an investigation. They noticed that my belongings had been moved, and my personal items had been disturbed. It didn't seem like a typical theft, because valuable items were left untouched. Instead, it indicated that an intruder had been in the house. The police started reviewing security camera footage. On the camera footage, we saw an unknown man sneaking into my house. A stranger's face roamed around my home, looking at my books, rummaging through my belongings. The sight of that moment was chilling. The police began to investigate who this person was. A few days later, we learned from local news that he had been found dead and had psychological issues. His family had reported him missing, but he hadn't returned. Unfortunately, he had gone missing on the same night he entered my house and was later found dead.